I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Honeypot from Flatout Games. Honeypot is a 1 to 6 player game of trying to tempt your opponents into selecting the less ideal hands of cards, hence the name Honeypot. This is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Before we dive into the game, this channel is sponsored by Allplay, more with them at the end of the video. With that said, Honeypot is going to be played out across 5 rounds. The name of the game is Honeypot. You are trying to tempt people into choosing cards that are less good for them than other cards. The way you're going to do that is, in each of the 5 rounds, you're going to go ahead and select 5 cards. Wow, that is a hand. That is a hand. I'm going to reshuffle and grab a few new cards over here, only because I want you to have more diversity of what's going on. That is a hand, although honestly, that will come up later in the review. Anyways, you have a hand of cards over here. So, we have a hand of cards, a whole bunch of different cards over here, and now our goal is to take those cards and put them into our envelope and pass them to the player to the left or the right, depending on which direction we are passing this round or not. So right now we're going to be passing to the right over here, and I'm going to assemble these cards in what I think is tempting or less tempting. So let's go ahead. Ooh, True Berries early on could be tempting, but maybe a Honey Swarm and a Code Book. Honey Swarm and a Code Book I think is tempting enough that they'd be concerned to go too far. And then we could put a Honey Dipper early on is not the worst because it's likely to go down. Combine it with a Disguise, and then lastly with the berries last. Okay, we're going to go ahead and construct our little envelope and then pass it to the player on our right. Now all players are doing this at the same time. They're constructing the envelopes and then they're passing them. And so right now, Orange is going to take the envelope. Once they've all done this, Orange is going to take the envelope, and they're going to open the envelope and reveal the top 2 cards, and only the top 2 cards. They're going to look at these cards and decide, do they want these cards, or do they want to go deeper? That's the question over here. The code books, they're worth 7 points for a pair of code books. There's multiple code books in the game. 1 code book is worth nothing. You could have 4 code books worth 14 points, etc., but every 2 code books is worth 7 points. The Honeycomb is worth 3 points plain and simple on its own, but as soon as you take it, you get the B token, which is worth -7 points if you are left holding the B token at the end of the game. This is a pretty decent starting hand, because starting off, you are almost likely to get more code books before the game is over. This is round 1 of 5. And the Honeycomb, you're almost certain to lose this over here, so you're kind of looking at 3 and 3.5 points per card right now, which given the ratio of the cards you get, that's not bad. So I think Orange is going to go ahead and take these and play it safe. Which is the whole point of this game, because had he gone to these next cards over here, we have a Honey Dipper, which is worth 6 points on its own. The flip side is that could go lower by the end of the game. Honey Dippers are worth 6 for 1, 3 for 2, and 0 if you have 3. Although if you do get a 4th one, the set starts again. Meanwhile, Disguises are worth points for the unique disguises you have. If you have 5 different disguises, they're worth 18 points. So again, it's tricky because that's worth more than 3 points per card, which is a good number, but you have to get a bunch of them to be able to score that high. Even if you get to 4, that's 3 points per card. Less than 4 is less than 3 points per card. So again, trying to math out the relative value of things. And then, had they chosen to pass on these, they could look at the last 2 cards, which are 2 berries. Berries over here get up to 14 points for a set of 4, and then 0 when you get to 5. So again, kind of dangerous there. You want to play them right as you go through it, trying to choose the berries, but don't get too many berries because you'll end up holding the bag. That's the basic concept of the game, but there are a few more things to go through. But once again, just before we get to the few more things, the general idea of the game is across 5 rounds of play, you're going to be stocking your envelope with 6 cards. You're going to place them in an order that you think is tempting or not tempting, depending how you're trying to play the other players. Meanwhile, they're going to reveal that envelope, going through the cards 2 at a time and deciding, once you reveal 2, you're good, you want these. If you don't, you reveal the next 2, you can't go back to the first 2, and whatever you're left with is what you're left with. And that's going to give you 10 cards by the end of the game, although there are ways to get more cards as you play. All players are doing this at once, so you're just going ahead and passing those, and that's the basic engine of play as you go through all these cards trying to figure out how they score. There's a lot of other things. These cards are worth points on their own. They're also worth more points if you have a set of 1, 2, and 3. There's negative point cards. These are going to lose you points for these, although if you get rid of a 1, if you have a 1, 2, and 3, you actually get to discard them. There's going to be special cards that reward you for your neighbors. And one of the things about the game is as you start building up your tableau in front of you, it stops being this random starting point, and now it's suddenly more interesting. That Honey Dipper that's worth 6 points to player A might be worth 0 points to player B because it's actually going to take their set down. It's actually worth -3 points. So it's really a dynamic of trying to play the player's tableaus and not just trying to construct the cards. Some other things to get into as far as the rules, you're going to have these paw tokens over here. These allow you to swipe from other players. Basically, the way it works over there is going back to that starting hand. when the player revealed those first 2 cards and took them, that means there's 4 more cards under there. Somebody else can go ahead and use one of their tokens, giving up this token, which is worth 2 points if you have it at the end of the game, in order to take the next cards. Basically, they take control of the remaining cards in the envelope, which means if it's the last 2 cards, they're just getting those, like it or not. And if it's 4 cards, they can go ahead and take these and then possibly decline and go for the next batch if they want. Players can do that, but not the player involved in the actual envelope sharing themselves. In this case, for example, with blue and orange, the other 2 players can go ahead and do that. And at the end of each round, you use these cards as the round counters. The way these work is whoever has the most negative point tokens in front of them, I mean those negative cards, that does not count the B token over here, they get to grab one of these, flip them, and benefit from those effects. Usually those are going to be things like action cards, which by the way, you can find those in this deck as well. In this case, you could discard 1 card and draw a card, helping you get rid of a negative point token, as negative point card, as well as possibly drawing up more cards that could help you out in the game. That is basically how you play through a game of Honeypot. You're playing across 5 rounds, which means those 10 cards. Again, these extra tokens can get you up to 14 cards if you use them. And then having cards, there's other cards in the deck, like things that let you draw 2 cards, that can get you extra cards. You're usually going to end somewhere between, I'd say the low end is obviously 10 cards, but you're usually going to end somewhere between 12 to 15 cards, where you're typically going to get in a game of Honeypot. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into my review of what I like, don't like, can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. It's a game of playing the players. That's what you're doing here. You're trying to construct the perfect set of cards based on the cards you draw. You draw 6 cards, and based on those cards, you're trying to figure out, well, what does Bill like? What does Bill like? Does he like kind of taking what's safe, or does he like going deeper? And also, what does Bill think of me? Does Bill think that I'm going to try to hide things, or just going to play it out front? And what about Sarah? Like, she's playing differently, and also, and my favorite part of the game, is you're not just playing the players, you're playing the players and the tableaus that they are building up. Because if Sarah has in front of her 2 berries, I can hand her 2 berries, and it's only round 2. You know how much fun it is to hand someone 4 berries on round 2? Because that's so many points, and it can go to 0 in a second. It's so satisfying to try to figure out, okay, great, we got 3 more rounds to try to pass Sarah berries. That's going to put her on edge the entire game. Like, what do you do about that kind of situation? So you're not just playing the players, you're playing the players as they build up their tableau and the choices they've made along the way. And that's going to result in these interesting choices of, like, I could put a negative point card as your first thing, knowing that you're thinking, well, I'm going to pass up on that because I don't want the negative point card. But that means the next card is probably a berry. He knows that, so I'm just going to take the negative point card. Joke's on you, Sarah. I had no berries. You're safe with those 4 berries. You are playing the players based on the way you construct your envelopes. It's all about mind games and knowing your group dynamics, and also knowing what your group thinks of you. This is the kind of game that's better to play with people that know each other, because you can benefit from the way you each get into each other's head as you go through it. The variety of cards and the scoring types adds a nice element to it, because you can always have any game where it's like, hey, positive points, negative points. You can theoretically structure this game with just plus and minus points. Having those different dynamics of how card scores, you get more. Card score based on your neighbors. Card score less points the more you get. Having all those cards, these are negative points, but you get 3 of them, you lose them. These are positive points. You get a set of 3 and suddenly it's worth more. All these different dynamics at play definitely gives you some degree of spice to the way the game plays. And the ability to steal someone's remaining cards, again, that adds another element of tension to the game of, like, hey, I got these pot tokens, I might as well use them at some point and try to gather a set. Like, I think Sarah passed that up. But the tricky part is, Sarah doesn't want berries, I do. So I think you planted berries in her stack, so I'm going to use my pot token to go ahead and steal that, knowing there's probably berries that you were trying to stick her with. Those interesting elements all add to this kind of just bluffing game with a bunch of dynamics at play. As far as things I don't like in the game, it does feel like a game that's best at 4+. I have played this. My lowest player count, to be fair, is 3 players. There's a 2-player rule as far... I haven't even looked at the solos, how that works. The 2 players have a rule as far as how you use these paws to go through things. Feels a little clunky, but I have not played it. 3 players has the lowest that I've played it, but I do feel it does thrive at higher player counts, higher at 4+. And again, it's a 4 to 6 player, well, 1 to 5 player game, 1 to 6 player. 1 to 6 player game. I think it's best at 4 to 6 players because of the dynamics at play. Even at 3 players, the tricky part is you can only 1 player can steal, and it's only like you can only steal from 1 player each round. That's tricky as far as that dynamic, and that's less variety of cards are entering play as you go. So I'm not saying it's bad at 3 players. I enjoyed my 3-player game, but I do think it's better at 4+. Also, I think the stealing actions are a little bit more blind than the traditional standard card draw, meaning you're handed these envelopes and you have choices to make based on, again, what I think Sarah's going to do, how I think Sarah thinks I play, based on the tableau in front of me. I have all the choices to make. But you have less agency over what you're going to do with these gravity paws most of the time. I know I gave you a specific example of how, like, oh, I'm going to steal from Sarah because someone was probably trying to give her berries and I actually want berries, that's pretty rare in the game. For me, when I've played through this, I have felt like I can make reasonable decisions around the envelope that is handed to me, and I have felt that using my gravity paws is a little bit more blind. I do it because usually what you get is worth more than 2 points, so I highly encourage you doing so, but overall I felt much more blind when I swiped from other players as opposed to the envelopes I got handed. And then my biggest complaint is I think there's not enough cards in the game. Again, on the low end you get 10 cards, but that's very unlikely. I'd say usually you're looking at 12 to 15 cards. It doesn't feel like a lot of cards take advantage of all these scoring dynamics. I do wish there was more cards in front of each player by the end of the game. However, the game structure that gives you more agency to have these highs and lows. The game feels like it's a little too tight just because you don't have that many cards by the time the 5 rounds of play are done. As far as what I can see others not liking, in general, there are better hands and worse hands. I mentioned at the beginning, as you saw that hand, that kind of thing does happen. Usually not a big deal, but very often having 1 or 2 negative cards, or even negative based on your tableau, does give me agency to play with the player, so to speak. Versus if you have all good cards, or even all bad cards, which is less common, honestly. I think that's the worst hand I've ever seen dealt at all. If you have all bad or all good, you're still playing the game of trying to figure out how to tempt or not tempt the player properly, but it does feel like there's a degree of luck, even if a smaller amount, as to just the general pool of cards that were even possible for you to get. Yes, you're trying to, again, go through that cycle of how to choose, but there's just a range. If you have good cards or bad cards, there is a potential range in terms of that. In general, the genre is going to be the biggest thing for me, meaning in terms of what I can see not being for you. If you don't like mind games and bluffing games, this is only a mind game and bluffing game. That's what this is. Everything else is flavor around this. This is all about trying to play the players. So if that's not your genre, this game's not for you. And then lastly, the catch-up mechanic is arguably a bit too strong. Being able to have the player with the most negative point cards, first of all, again, doesn't take into advantage of your full score. It just looks at one element. So it's this weird catch-up mechanic that isn't looking at who's losing. It's looking at, if we look at this one element, who's likely to be losing, which is not the same the way this game's structured. And then it has you drawing a card over here, which these can be a huge difference in points for being someone who has 1 more negative point card. You potentially get a big shift. Again, discard a card. You can make discard your -3 and then draw your 5th disguise. That can have a huge swing over there. The catch mechanic is definitely feels a little more of an overcompensation that isn't even always targeting the player who's in last place, if that makes sense. As far as final thoughts on Honeypot, it's fun. It's charming. It's a fun and charming game if you like bluffing, if you like mind games like this. I think ultimately this does a good job of being a little distinct within a genre of how to play the other players with a bluffing mechanic. It does feel, and the whole thematic element of putting together your envelopes just feels fun to go ahead and assemble that. But ultimately, it's chaos, and it's mind games. It's not a high strategy game. It's more of a party game, but with that strategy or bluffing element packed in. I think my biggest complaint is I do wish I got more cards out of it. Overall, it's a good time, but within the genre that it's doing. For me, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, definitely check out Agent Avenue if you're looking for another mind game of trying to figure out whether the player can read your intentions. And also check out Skull for one of my favorite games in the genre, again, trying to figure out how far do you think I'm pushing you and what is the right choice to make. Highly recommend Skull and Agent Avenue. And then I mentioned that Allplay is a channel sponsor. In Allplay, you can go ahead and check out games from both themselves as well as their partner publishers. You can get group shipping for $4 in the USA. And check out Turnip from Rose Gauntlet Entertainment if you're looking for another bit of a mind game, kind of a bluffing element of trying to figure out did they actually say what they were doing. Check out Turnip from Rose Gauntlet Entertainment. In any case, then until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.